Hey everyone, I'm Brad and this is Watch Rate Heart. And I am back to do another 7 films from 1995 for my final 1995 film reviews. Now, does this mean I've watched every 1995 film out there? No, in fact, there are some notable ones I haven't been able to watch. But this will round out the final reviews before I decide which of the 129 1995 films I have watched that I think are best. I'm going to do it again. I'm not going to do as many Letterboxd reviews as I do in most episodes, but I think I've got some notable ones for you anyway. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get into the first film.
Incredible for me to be here on this stage with my sister. The single person I'll miss when I leave this earth.
And that is Georgia, starring Jennifer Jason Leigh and Mare Winningham, directed by Ulu Grosbard. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.4 out of 5, a Rotten Tomatoes score of 81% fresh, and this got one Oscar nomination, and that is for Best Supporting Actress for Mare Winningham. Now, if I'm being honest, there's one film that this movie reminds me of, and that is the 1996 legal thriller Primal Fear. Now, I know you guys are being like, whoa, wait a minute. This is a film about addiction and sisterhood. How does this remind you of Primal Fear? Well, it does in this way. Georgia is fairly average in nearly every way. It's a fairly average sister drama. It's a fairly average drama about family. It's a fairly average drama about addiction. Everything about the film is honestly average and forgettable. There are numerous reasons why that is, and I will get into that. Now, the reason why I think this reminds me of Primal Fear is something that I'm going to use this Letterboxd review from Jerry. Jerry gave this film 3 stars. But look at what Jerry says. Jerry says Jennifer Jason Leigh not winning an Oscar for her performance in this film is a fucking crime against humanity. And I agree with Jerry. Maybe not with the winning the Oscar. Well, actually, yeah, kind of, actually. But Jennifer Jason Leigh's performance is so damn good in this movie. It is stunning she did not get nominated for this role. I'm going to be honest. For the first half of the film, I was watching the film going, this movie's okay, and Jennifer Jason Leigh is okay in it too. I mean, she's good, but I'm not seeing what other people are seeing about how this is a great performance. And then there's a scene in the film where she's in a concert with a lot of people, and she's performing, and then that's when it unlocked with me going, oh my god, that is a great performance. She's raw, visceral, and when she spirals out of control later on, it really cements how good her performance is. And then honestly, as the film went forward, there were things that she did in the beginning of the film that suddenly just dawned on me how brilliant her performance was. It was an amazing performance in this film, and I agree with Jerry here. She should have gotten nominated for this role. She was fantastic. Now, I also said the rest of the film is average, and I think the reason why is because they should have fleshed out more of the story involving Georgia, which is Mare Winningham's character, and her family, so it would really round out a lot better. To me, the film is all about Sadie in this film, which is Jennifer Jason Leigh's character. The thing with Sadie is that she adores and looks up to her sister to a great degree. And it just seems like Mare Winningham's Georgia is kind of just cold and callous, even though in a way she does still care about Sadie in this film. And this is just a person that has seen her sister go up and down. I kind of get the performance in a lot of ways. And it just makes her seem cold, and it makes it kind of seem weird that Sadie still admires her so much. And I think that could have been helped if they would have spent more time developing Georgia and the family in this. I think that's the big problem I have with this film, other than the film being kind of average. With that, I'm going to give the film Georgia a rating of 3 stars out of 5, the same thing that Jerry gave it. And that's because the film is, again, pretty average, but it's saved by a fantastic performance by Jennifer Jason Leigh. Honestly, if you are a fan of her at all, you should watch this movie. She is absolutely brilliant in this. Now, if you look at all the parts of the film, it's fairly average, and there could have been ways that they could have developed other characters more to give it more of a personality, but for what the film is, it's an okay film, but it probably has one of the best performances by Jennifer Jason Leigh I have ever seen. So 3 stars out of 5 for me for Georgia. Next up is the film from the Netherlands, Antonia's Line, directed by Marleen Gorris. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.9 out of 5, a Rotten Tomatoes score of 69% fresh, and it was nominated and won the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film in 1996. And I gotta be honest, I'm a little bit surprised that the critic score is as low as it is. because I thought this was a very odd, whimsical fairy tale that really worked. Now, an odd feminist fairy tale. I gotta point that out, because usually, and this is more recently if I'm being honest, a lot of stories recently that have a feminist twist end up being kind of bad in my eyes, because the characters themselves are just not all that interesting, and the film cares more about messaging and getting a point across than it does actually having a good story and characters. And I think this is what Antonia's line does incredibly well. It has really good characters, especially in the main character, Antonia, who has a really good performance by Wilke von Emelroth. Oh my god, I know I've butchered that name, I'm so sorry. But the lead actress who plays Antonia in this film is really good. And a lot of the other performances are great as well in this movie. The film is also paced incredibly well. There doesn't seem to be a lot of dead time. There's not a lot of drawn-out scenes. And that's because the film is about an hour and 45 minutes. You know, what's funny about this film is that it kind of reminded me of My Family, Mi Familia, which I reviewed, I think, about a couple months back. This film is very similar to Mi Familia, where it's really about a family spanning a bunch of years and how they live. And Mi Familia, I think, dragged out for way too long. But this film does everything better than what Mi Familia did in about 45 less minutes. I was thinking about that, goes, wow, that's actually really good. And again, none of the characters are bad. I like really all the characters you're meant to like. I dislike some of the characters you're meant to dislike, obviously. And I think some might have a problem with how one-dimensional some of the characters are in this film. And that's fair, but I think it fits well within the framework of the story. It's a fairy tale movie in the end. It's a movie that is more fantastical. It is more about, I can't say it's more about vibes than it is about telling a story. But there is this whimsical kind of fairy tale vibe to the film, even though it doesn't hide the more serious part, which I was surprised by and actually really appreciated as the film was moving forward. So overall, with Antonia's line, I'm giving it 4 stars out of 5. This was a great movie. I really liked it. I was actually a little surprised I liked it so much, because in the beginning, I kind of saw where it was going. But as the film barreled towards the end of the film, I was really digging the vibe of the film and how the film mixed its drama and its comedy really well, while not really skimping on both. I think the lead performance of the film is really good, but again, this is a very well-paced film. It's got this nice feel to it, even though it doesn't shy away from some serious subjects in the film, and it does all of it really well. So 4 stars out of 5 for me for Antonia's line. All right, let's get into the Letterboxd reviews. This one is from James Gildo. James Gildo gives it 4 stars out of 5 with a heart. And James says, Antonia's line is entirely magical and powerful with its feminist soul. Gorris created a world where surreal images collide between a moving and lighthearted narrative of women with meaningful ideologies. Its belief isn't preached. That is key. See, that's the thing that I think a lot of feminist-coded movies have a problem with these days. In this movie, they don't preach. They just show the ideas, and they worry more about story and character than the message. It sticks to its bones, and it gorgeously reflects to every character in love, rage, and resilience. And the lead performance as Antonia carries enough charm and intelligence through the end. It feels too ahead of its time, and somehow I'm glad that precious gems like this light up those old years anyway. It's a perfect celebration of women and the lives they built when left to their own devices. Radical, energized, and extraordinary. And James makes a lot of good points in this review. I agree with him. This is far ahead of its time. This is one of the best ones I have seen. For about 10 years, we've had a plethora of feminist-coded movies and TV shows, and it feels like most of them aren't that good. That's not what James said. That's what I said, but I agree with him. This film is ahead of its time, and the fact that it does not get enough love is a little disappointing for me. So let's go the opposite end. This is not really a negative review, but this is one that's a little bit critical. This is from Johnny Andrews. Johnny gives it 3 stars out of 5. And he says, I enjoyed this Dutch drama, although it ran out of steam fairly quickly. It reminded me a bit of an Aki Kaurismäki film, where fate seems to be guiding everything along slowly, but it didn't feel as convinced of its own whimsy as it could have been. Some genuinely touching moments and amusing sequences, and some of the best aging makeup I've seen in a long time, but nothing life-changing overall. That last point that Johnny Andrews made about the makeup, I absolutely agree. I even forgot about that, because a lot of the times the aging makeup kind of detracts from what you're watching, and it's very noticeable. I completely forgot about the aging makeup. It almost felt like they were aging in front of me. It was so good. So that's a good point with Johnny Andrews on that. I like this film a lot more than I was really expecting to, but really it's a film that I'm surprised does not get a lot of love nowadays. But I think that's a lot to do with access. I think if this was on like Netflix or Amazon Prime streaming, it would get a lot more notice, but I think the only places I could find it was on Canopy and Hoopla. And I think it might have been on the Criterion Channel at one point, but this is a film that when Women's History Month comes up, I think someone should really pick this up and make a big deal out of this and watch this, because this was a really good movie. I really enjoyed Antonia's Line. This next film I'm discussing is from another country as well, and this film is from Iran, The White Balloon, directed by Jafar Panahi. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.9 out of 5, a Rotten Tomatoes score of 83% fresh, and it did not win or was nominated for any Oscars. The White Balloon is actually a very simple movie. It basically is about a girl who tries to buy a goldfish. That's it. That's really all it is. As simple as the story is, the depth is in more of what happens around her, and it basically is a story about innocence and purity and how the adults around her tried to take advantage of her because of it. And the film does a good enough job showing that, even though, again, the film is fairly simple. It doesn't have a lot of depth when it comes to characters or when it comes to, I guess, the themes that it's going by. It just shows it as is. What I will say is the lead actress is perfectly cast. She is adorable, yet I can definitely believe her being pretty annoying to some people, but still also sympathetic. That's a really hard line to cross. You can have a little girl who is annoying, and then you'd be like, well, yeah, if she's that annoying, I wouldn't want to help her either. But if she's too adorable and too cute, I'd be like, oh, God, you're trying really hard to make me sympathize with this little girl. How can anyone find that annoying? They'd find her too adorable. The actress they got was perfect, not only by looks, but how she performed the role as well. I think she was really good in it. But if I'm being absolutely honest, I think I responded more to the cuteness of the main character and what she goes through more than I think the themes of the film. I get what the film was trying to do. I understand what the film was trying to say. I just don't think it really resonated all that well with me. I kind of had the feeling of, well, yeah, that was her parents' fault for being this dumb to rely on her to do this. But did I enjoy the film? Yes. But to me, I didn't get the appeal that I think other people on Letterboxd did. So when it comes to The White Balloon, I'm going to give this film 3.5 stars out of 5. Again, I think there's a lot that this film does really well. I think the actress who plays the little girl is perfectly cast. I think she's adorable. But I can also see her being a little annoying, but also still being sympathetic. I think she performs it very well. I do understand that the film is very simple in story, and it tries to add more depth with the themes of innocence and purity. But if I'm being quite honest, the thing I responded to most was the actress and not the themes and what the film was saying. I was just watching this going, oh, this poor little girl. Oh my God, it's so terrible. I understand what the film was trying to say, but it didn't resonate as much as I was hoping. Overall, 3.5 out of 5 stars for me for The White Balloon. Now, onto the Letterboxd reviews. I chose one review for this one, but I want to say that all the friends that I had rated this 3.5 stars or 4 stars. But I'm going to choose Raphael Jovine, who also calls himself Mr. Movie. Raphael gives it 3.5 stars out of 5 with a heart. Now, what Raphael talks about here is about Abbas Kiarostami, who is the writer of the film. I actually really like Abbas Kiarostami as a director. That one thing he's good at is coming up with interesting subjects or turning the most mundane into something rather interesting, which I agree with. This is the case of this movie. A very simple and overly minimalistic story. It's very compelling to some really good and sweet performance by the leads, especially the little girl. All in all, a straightforward and cute story about the danger of the streets that anyone can very well relate. So like I mentioned in the review, the themes of the story, I think the story itself, I think was fine, but I don't think it really resonated with me all that well. This to me just felt like a story of just bad parenting. But again, I did like the little girl in the film. I also like the little boy as well, I should say. It's funny, I have the same rating as Raphael here, but I like it for very different reasons, which is also very interesting to see when that happens. Again, The White Balloon is a good movie. I think if you are a fan of Kiarostami, or if you actually like what the film is trying to do, I would say check it out. I like it for different reasons than most other people do, but again, I will admit, it's a good movie. Oh, look, another foreign film. This one is from Pedro Almodovar, and that's The Flower of My Secret. This has a Letterboxd score of 3.6 out of 5, a Rotten Tomatoes score of 86% fresh, and this did not get any nominations or won any Oscars. And I want to say right off the bat, I love the aesthetics of this film. I love the locations, the costumes, even the way that Almodovar shoots specific scenes. I think the film is aesthetically very pleasing to the eye. Very good looking film. As for the story, it's not that bad, but it's not as good as the quality of the visuals. I guess the best way to think of this film is it's kind of a really good-looking soap opera with a lot more depth to it. There is an interesting story in here involving identity, relationships, emotions, stuff like that. But if I'm honest, the story didn't really engage me or keep me all that interested. It's a fine story. I enjoyed it for what it was, but for this being my first Almodovar film, I guess I didn't get what I think a lot of people say is so great about him. Then again, I think his most well-known films are later, like All About My Mother, Volver, Talk to Her. I think those are his most well-known and more beloved films. Maybe this is not the right one to start watching his films with. So overall, I'm going to give The Flower of My Secret 3 stars out of 5. It's a fine movie. I think aesthetically it's really pleasing, from the visuals to the music, to the way the sets are, to the costumes. I think it's a beautiful looking film. I just didn't get engaged in the story all that much. I do see the depth in the film, but I guess the way that it plays itself off as like a soap opera that's really good looking, it just didn't really mesh with me all that well. So 3 stars out of 5 for me for The Flower of My Secret. Alright, so let's get into the Letterboxd reviews. This is a Guillotinette, and they give this 3.5 stars out of 5 with a heart, and they said, there's a scene that will be one of those snapshots I'll hold on to in my mind's eye, where she goes to the publishing office and we see she is standing off screen, but we see her reflected multiple times in the windows overlapping his figure, facing her behind the glass. This is between 2 characters experiencing and questioning identity, pseudonyms, ghostwriting, attraction, mutual respect, admiration, all literally and figuratively represented in this shot. I think the film is very beautiful when it comes to the aesthetics and how it looks. And yes, there is symbolism to what's going on. I guess I didn't really like how the story is being presented, I guess in its soap opera kind of way. I guess I found the main character not as interesting and a little more annoying than I think most did. And let's get into this last review. This is from BroadBaby69. BroadBaby69 gives it 3 stars out of 5, and they say, from a young age, Almodovar's movies taught me that you can still have an impeccable wardrobe when your life is falling apart. Yeah, no kidding, right? Usually when I'm having a terrible time, I'm in, like, disgusting sweats and a t-shirt, but this woman looks stunning when even she is just miserable. I guess this is the wrong movie for me to start watching Almodovar's films, because I didn't see what I think a lot of people have said about his films. Then again, I will watch All About My Mother, Talk to Her, and a lot of his other films as well. I didn't hate the film. I actually liked it for what it was. I guess I just didn't see where the absolute love for this director is in this film, at least. But then again, probably the wrong film to start with. My lord, did I choose to do all the foreign films last? Sure feels like it. The next one is Agnes Varda's 101 Nights. And it has a Letterboxd score of 3.8 out of 5. It does not have a Rotten Tomatoes score, and it was not nominated for any Oscars or won any as well. This is just a fun movie celebration about films. I think what really makes it fun is the cameos of the film. There's a lot of different cameos from Jean-Paul Belmondi, Marcello Mastroianni, Robert De Niro shows up, Catherine Deneuve. If you're really into foreign films or art house films, there are a ton of cameos you'll like. And there's a lot of references to a lot of art house and foreign language films that are sprinkled in throughout the film. And really, any scenes that have Mr. Cinema in it, which is played by Michel Piccoli, is good in this film. I enjoy those scenes very much. But then again, anything involving Mr. Cinema is good. The problem is everything else, and everything else is kind of pointless and boring. So what this film is about is Mr. Cinema is 100 years old, and in order to maintain his mental faculties, a young woman by the name of Camille comes in and talks movies with her every day for about a couple of hours, just to keep his mental faculties up. And it's just a film that's littered with a bunch of cameos and a bunch of references to other films. And when it's with Mr. Cinema and all that, it's charming. It's actually kind of funny. The problem is there's a whole whole other part of the film that is just bad, and it has to do with Camille and her friend group and her boyfriend who are trying to make a film, and for some reason throughout the entire film they're trying to scam Mr. Cinema out of money, and that was just really odd, because we have this film that's just a celebration of cinema, and it's just like a very happy, glossy type of film that says, hey, do you remember this movie? Hey, remember that actor? And it's pretty charming in that way. And then they do this whole fraud scheme, and I'm like, why? This is so dumb. Why would you do that? And it really just slows down the film. But what's odd about this film is there are certain films that I kind of avoid because it's cameo filled, and yet this film uses those cameos very well. I will say that it kind of works for me because I like art house cinema, I like foreign language cinema, so it was kind of like, oh, that's neat, okay, that's Marcello Mastroianni popping up every once in a while, that's cool. I was fine with it, so I guess maybe I'm okay with those cameos, but anything outside of the cameos and the references, to me, are just bad. But what I will say also with the references, I don't understand why Agnes Varda decided to reference something and then show what was being referenced. I think, to me, if you're watching this movie and you know what it is, you either get the references and you don't. And if you don't get the references, you'll probably want to look up what the references are from and maybe watch that movie. But instead, the film just says, oh, by the way, if you didn't get this reference, it's from this. And I'm like, why? Like, why even put that there? This is not for a mainstream audience, so that seems kind of silly to me. So yeah, I did like 101 Nights. It's a fun movie, but I do think it's deeply flawed in some major ways. That's why I'm giving this 2.5 stars out of 5. Again, anything with Mr. Cinema is good, and I really do like the cameos and the references, and it's just a fun movie about celebrating films. I just wish it stuck to that, because when it goes into what's going on with Camille and her friend group and them trying to scam Mr. Cinema, I just stood there going, why? Why even include this? This just seems really weird. But I will say this. You are interested in the type of films that I'm interested in. This is a fun movie to watch. I just was a little disappointed with the direction it went into. So 2.5 stars out of 5 for me for 101 Nights. All right, let's get into the Letterboxd reviews. This is from Todd in brackets. Todd gives this 4 stars out of 5 with a heart. And Todd says basically this is a weird film, and I kind of agree with him on that. This is kind of a sort of meta commentary on film that he does love, and when you throw in Agnes Varda's unique and flowy style, you've got a real treat here. I actually do agree with that. I think the style of the film, the way that it runs, is actually very fun. Michel Piccoli is great as Simon Cinema. I agree with that, which is important because without him, the movie falls flat, and I absolutely agree with that. Also, you get to see Robert De Niro talk in French, so watch it. Yeah, that was weird. It's like, he pulls it off, even though I don't think he knows what he said, but I thought that was cute, especially with Catherine Deneuve in there. And this next review is from Chad. Chad gives it 3.5 stars out of 5 with a heart, and he says, what a cast. Never would I have thought to see Bob and Catherine in a movie. Anyway, I could see why Agnes said this flopped. It has many references to iconic classics in Hollywood that the common audience won't really get, making it all a bit alienating, which I 100% agree with. I understand why it bombed, but I also got a little frustrated that she tried to pepper in the references with what they were referencing. It was odd for me. But for some, it is really a fun watch since they got to see all those movies being referenced and knowing what happened in them and who the casts are. I'll definitely rewatch this when I've watched enough classics. Love you, Agnes. Yeah, I will say this, though. Did I get every reference in this film? No, I did not. And that's kind of what makes me curious about watching this a second time. If I check those movies out that this film is referencing, maybe I'll get more out of this. But even then, I still don't understand the whole plot line outside of Mr. Cinema. That's where I'm like, that doesn't belong there. But yeah, 2.5 stars out of 5 for me on this one. I will say I definitely enjoyed it. I think it's a fun film, but there are just glaring issues that I have with this film. So that's just my take on that. Oh man, another foreign language film? Although it's got a good amount of dialogue in English as well, to be fair. This one is The Pillow Book, starring Vivian Wu and Ewan McGregor, directed by Peter Greenaway. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.5 out of 5. It has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 68% fresh, and it did not get nominated or win any Oscars. The first thing I have to point out in this movie is that visually and musically, the film is gorgeous. It is absolutely stunning to watch. The lighting and cinematography is incredibly well done. The use of colors in a lot of scenes, really gorgeous. And the way that the music mixes itself with, I think it's like traditional Japanese songs with, I guess, music of that day, is also really well done. Just anything aesthetically in this film is fantastic. And the editing and the playing with aspect ratios is also incredibly stunning. In the film, Greenaway uses, I guess it would be picture-in-picture, or he superimposes other scenes into scenes in like a 2 or 3 split way kind of way in certain aspects of the film. And it's, again, visually, it's gorgeous to look at. It's kind of confusing at times. It gets kind of annoying in certain aspects, but when it comes to just visual-wise, it is incredibly appealing to watch. Visuals alone, this film is really good. The Pillow Book really tries to be this film that is much more sensual and much more like an erotic film. It's supposed to get you horny and hard and wet and whatever you want to be when you are aroused. And I didn't feel that at all. I mean, there's a lot of nudity. Don't get me wrong. And the film tries to play itself off as sexy with the red and intimate lighting and the very soft lighting and the very sensual mood that's around the film. But I gotta be honest, aroused is not one of those things I was in this film. But the other problem that I have as well is that the story and characters aren't really that compelling until the final act with what happens with Jerome. Jerome is played by Ewan McGregor, by the way. I won't spoil what happens, but I have to be honest. The only thing that kept me compelled watching it in the first 2 acts, just how beautiful the visuals are and how great the music was and everything. When it came to the story, I was kind of struggling a bit there. I felt it was kind of boring and uninteresting in a lot of ways, but the visuals are what kept me. When the third act started getting going, that's when the film and the characters started to get a little more interesting with me, which is funny because in the third act, the main character isn't in the film all that much. She's actually in the background doing things, but what happens is what makes her character interesting in that sense. There's a bunch of issues I have with the Pillow Book. There's things I really like about the Pillow Book. So as a rating, I'm going to give it 3 stars out of 5. I think it's a very interesting film, but the most interesting thing about the film is the music and the visuals. They're all incredibly stunning, and the way that the editing works and plays with the aspect ratio is also incredibly stunning. But if I'm talking about the story, it didn't do all that much for me, and if the main point of the film was to be sexy and erotic, it didn't work for me either, to be completely honest with you. And it really had nothing to do with like, oh, it's a bunch of people drawing on each other to get off. That's not really the problem I had. It was really that the themes of what happened in the film, specifically what happens to the main character's father, clashes with what's going on in the film to make it erotic. I would really have to explain it in a much deeper detail, but I think the main character's quote-unquote fetish, I don't really think it's a fetish. I think it's more of a thing that she needs to get close to somebody because it was the only way she got close with her father, and what happens with her father, it kind of caused a problem mentally in her, and her way of processing it was through all the writing on flesh and stuff like that. I couldn't find that erotic. I found it more sad. The film trying to make it out as a very sexual thing just felt off to me. But again, 3 stars out of 5 for me for The Pillow Book. It's an interesting film. Alright, so let's get into the Letterboxd reviews. We have Raphael, Mr. Movie Jovine. Mr. Movie gives it 2.5 stars out of 5 with a heart. And Mr. Movie says, a film made for those who get kinky on English class, not with the girls. Or boys. Or whatever. But with the words Marvin Gaye, let's get it on starts playing. That's funny. That's funny. That's actually hilarious. Look, as any Peter Greenaway movie, this is a visually and technically brilliant film. The use of double and triple screen on the same image to build upon one compelling composition that comes together so well, you can't help but to love Greenaway more. The score that blends Japanese traditional music and U2 was really good and helps enhancing the picture. And of course, the cinematography is splendid as any other of Peter Greenaway's movies. Unfortunately, all this amazing stuff comes wrapped in a snooze of a film. The narrative is simply tiresome and overly pretentious. The film was desperately trying to get me horny, and the more it tried, the more it was turning me into a repressed Bible Belt lady. You know what? I agree with that with Mr. Movie here. All in all, I guess if you are a Greenaway completionist or looking for a weird take to eroticism, I guess this is worth a try. Otherwise, skip it. I think me and Mr. Movie agree in a lot of ways about this film. I didn't find this film erotic at all, and I think he's right. The more it tried, the more it turned me off. And the story itself is not great. Neither are the characters. But the visuals are what make this film so appealing. I give it a half-star extra, but I kind of see myself agreeing with everything Mr. Movie says on his review here. And we have Alex. Alex gives it 2.5 stars out of 5, and he says, I'm convinced Ewan McGregor was butt-ass naked for half the 90s. I don't think you need to be convinced of that, Alex. He really was. But yeah, again, there are stuff that I like about the Pillow Book, namely the visuals and the technical stuff around the film, the cinematography, the lighting, the way that the visuals look, the music. That stuff's fantastic. But I find myself agreeing with Mr. Movie is that the story and characters are just not that compelling. And I think that's the big problem with the Pillow Book. But if you want to see something that has an interesting take on eroticism, like he said, I'd say go for it, give it a shot. Otherwise, I think Mr. Movie is right. You can skip it. And finally, our final film from 1995 is an English film, and you can't get more English than William Shakespeare. So for the last film, I'm reviewing Richard III, starring Ian McKellen, Annette Bening, Jim Broadbent, and Robert Downey Jr., directed by Richard Loncraine. It has a Letterboxd score of 3.7 out of 5, a Rotten Tomatoes score of 96% fresh, and it was nominated for 2 Oscars, including Best Art Direction and Best Costume Design. I have to say, I feel the exact same way about Richard III that I did about Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, is that modernizing only the looks of a Shakespeare story and not the language as well feels incredibly strange. I'm watching this film, and grant you, I do understand what's happened. I do like Shakespeare's language and plays, so I do enjoy watching them. And when I was younger, I enjoyed reading them too. But what was really odd about Romeo and Juliet for me is that when you set it in the modern times around that time, I think, which was 1993, 94 at the time, I think the film came out in 97, there are too many things in the film that remind you this is a story from a very old time. And what you're supposed to do when you're modernizing and adapting that is to adapt it to today's time, which is why it felt so odd that the film had gunfights, and yet they spoke like they were in a sword fight. And the same thing kind of happens in Richard III. Not the same things that happened in Romeo and Juliet, but different things that just really felt odd throughout the film. And the problem I have mainly with that, you would need to know going in that, oh, this is based off a William Shakespeare play. Okay, so with that known, all this really turns in for me is like a curiosity play where I'm like, okay, so what did they do to make this feel right? And it just never feels right. Now, this is set, I believe, in Europe in like the 1940s. I think that's what they were going for, probably around World War II time. And just a lot of things that are in the film, when it comes to language and how the characters act, just feel really odd. I can't really articulate it better than that. I just think that the way that they are acting doesn't feel right for the time period. And because of that, there is a strange dissonance that I have watching this film that just keeps reminding me, it's from a Shakespeare play, it's from a Shakespeare play, it's from a Shakespeare play. If I have to do all that work to look at this film and go, okay, it's this odd and it's this weird because they are basing it off a Shakespeare play and all they did was update the visuals. I don't think that's really all that creative. It's actually more annoying, to be absolutely honest with you, and it's the same problem I had with Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. What I will say, though, is that the look of the film, the costumes, the art direction do look great. They are very well done in the film, especially the costumes. I think the costumes look fantastic on everybody. I would especially say Ian McKellen's character looks particularly great, with the types of clothing that he wears also making his hump prominent throughout. Speaking of that character, Ian McKellen is great as the lead. I think that he just has a blast being so evil in this film, and he just clearly is having a great time playing the character in this really one-dimensional, sneeringly evil way. I think he just enjoys playing this character. So I'm going to be honest, I have the same problems with this film that I had with Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet. And even though I had more problems with Romeo and Juliet because of how loud and obnoxious it is, even though Romeo and Juliet, the play, isn't meant to be, I think you can get away with it a little bit more with Richard III. But even so, I'm going to give Richard III 2 stars out of 5. I'm sorry, the dissonance between the language that is being used to what's on screen just feels incredibly off to me. And it's just a constant reminder that, okay, I gotta remind myself, this is based off a very old play, and it just feels like you really need to understand that as you're watching. Even when you're going, God, that feels so weird, why is it like that? You always have to have that in the back of your mind and excuse so many weird and unusual things that with other films and other adaptations, you don't give them that grace. So I'm not giving this film that grace myself. I do think Ian McKellen's great in the role, and I think the way the film looks is actually very well done. But other than that, I can't recommend this film. So, 2 stars out of 5 for me for Richard III. And let's get into the final Letterboxd reviews for 1995 films. This is Sam Fay. Sam Fay gives it 4 stars out of 5 with a heart. And Sam says, Ian McKellen is having so much fun being evil as fuck. He has to curl up on the couch going through his brother's murder photos and laugh my ass off. Yes. That's why I think he's having a great time. It's like, oh my god, oh, look at him die. I'm like, oh god, that's hilarious. Great adaptation. The fourth wall breaking was weird at first, but makes sense why they did it. McKellen's entrance was badass. The fourth wall breaking, I did think it was weird at first. That didn't bother me so much, but I had so many other complaints with the film. After a while, I just kind of went, whatever. That's my feeling of it. Let's get into the final review. This is from Mads. Mads gives it 3 stars out of 5 with a heart. And he says, I had no prior knowledge about the story nor the historical events it is based on, so I struggled a bit to understand what was going on, which is only made harder by the old language. The story is interesting, and I liked how they set it in an alternate version of the 20th century, since they gave it a more modern feel, but I still struggled to stay engaged to it. Yes, me too. With more education in Shakespeare and English history, I might have enjoyed this more, but I didn't care much for the things I understood. See, that shouldn't be your problem. I shouldn't have to say to myself, okay, it's a Shakespeare story, the way they're talking like this is this, I don't know why it feels odd the way they're doing this. That should not be your problem. If you don't understand, that's the film's fault, unless the film is made to be obtuse for a reason. It is a well-made movie, and I found much to enjoy about it, but it is still just not entirely my thing. I am with you there. The cast was great with many great performances, and Ian McKellen being phenomenal as the titular main character. I did like Ian McKellen in this, but I agree mostly with Mads here. I think he really hits the nail right in the head with the main point that he made, which is it's hard to stay engaged in something if you don't quite understand why they're doing what they're doing. And again, I like the language of Shakespeare. I have no problem figuring out what they're trying to say, but it still feels really odd coming from the mouth of people from the 20th century. It just does. And my feeling will always be with adaptations of Shakespeare. If you're truly going to adapt it to a modern day, fully adapt it to modern day. Stop doing this. Oh, it's set in today, but they talk like they're from the Shakespearean time. Like, no, stop it. You're really going to do it? Just do it at that point. I'm not the biggest fan of 10 Things I Hate About You, but I do appreciate that they take a Shakespearean play, they adapt it to modern times, and it works. It works. It's not like that if you do that, it's going to lessen the material. The original material will be there. Just adapt it fully. That's all I ask. That's all I ask. And that is it for this episode of Watch Rate Heart. But before I go, let me ask you a question. What is your favorite film, performance, director, or screenplay from 1995? Let me know in the comments, and I may use it for my best of 1995 videos on the week of Thanksgiving. And of course, you'll find out what my favorites are then. If you liked any of the reviewers I highlighted in this episode, you can check the video description for a link to their Letterboxd profile, and be sure to give them a follow, and tell them Brad from Watch Rate Heart sent you. You can follow me at Letterboxd and X at Watch Rate Heart. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed it, and share with your friends. I'm Brad from Watch Rate Heart. Thank you for watching, and remember, we all watch and rate movies, but you give them the heart that makes them live forever.